You're all grown up. How are you?
Trying to do better.
Unlike us boring humans, where through the years we get in worse shape and then outright die, our favorite costume comic characters are eternal. What, the Green Goblin died?
Well, it's no big deal.
Let's just use some magic and he's back and better than ever. Let's take a look at how exactly the live-action Spider-Man characters have changed through the years, from the Raimi days all the way over to No Way Home. It's been just about 20 years since Tobey's Spidey first swung into our hearts, and from his last appearance in 2007 Spider-Man 3 to No Way Home, how has he changed? Surprisingly, he hasn't really.
Oh, my back!
One eternity later.
Oh, it's my back.
During the production process, the scriptwriters asked Tobey about how he envisioned the character has progressed off screen, and his answer was to keep all that backstory stuff to a minimum. It's fine, it's not like I've been creating countless fan fictions over the last 2 decades trying to figure out where he's been. On the bright side, he did mention that he and MJ made it work, so congrats on that, I guess? While the costuming department for this one tried to replicate the classic costumes as closely as possible, some eagle-eyed fans noticed some minute changes between what we last saw. The raised webbing on Peter 2's costume is a little less pronounced, and the theatrical cut of the film had his eyes a little more white than the silver lenses we are used to. Shifting gears from one fully grown man in a spandex unitard and into another, and we have Bill Murray. Andrew's performance in this film was one big second chance for both the character and the actor himself. The basis of that was the idea that following the events of Amazing Spider-Man 2, the wall crawler became resentful and violent, pretty much a Bully Maguire without the black suit. This ties beautifully into Tom's arc and gives our youngest Spidey an older brother to learn from, while also allowing Andrew to shine, proving that he deserves to be on the Mount Rushmore of wall crawlers.
That's good.
Right?
That's better.
Yeah.
With everything changing, it's nice to see some constants, and for me, quite possibly my favorite part of the movie occurred during the movie's money shot. When all 3 web-slingers are web-slinging, we see each and every one of them swinging in the styles informed by their films. Tobey's movements are a little more static, akin to the movements that Computer Generated Imagery was able to pull out 2 decades ago. We even get the classic Maguire, which was just a great little touch. Andrew's movements are a blend of the realistic swinging from the wire work of The Amazing Spider-Man 1 and the absolutely comic accurate moves we see in the sequel. It's great to see that these details are not lost in time. In No Way Home, it's explained that Doc Ock was pulled right from the moment he was gonna kill Spidey at the Hudson River, but just because it's a direct continuation of that moment doesn't mean he's the exact same. With all this time that has passed, CGI and its integration in films has entirely been redefined. So much of what we saw in the Raimi movies was practical. One of the most impressive special effects was the creation of the tentacles. These bad boys weighed in at around 60 pounds and, depending on the version used, scaled all the way out to 13 feet long. On top of the impressive props was some incredible puppeteering. Each arm typically had one puppeteer attached to it, controlling even the most subtle movement like the lighting of his cigarette. Of course, that movie also has some CGI moments with the tentacles. For some reason, they couldn't get Alfred Molina stuck to the side of a moving train while doing action choreography. The big difference in No Way Home is everything with the tentacles is computer generated. This cut down on shooting time and allowed for more dynamic movements to be made, which would make Doc appear more dangerous, but honestly, nothing will ever be scarier than that hospital room scene. I've been talking about tentacles a lot. I feel like I'm covering Squid Girl, so let's focus on some other changes made to our favorite octopus man. Alfred Molina was a little self-conscious about his tummy being revealed now that he's a senior citizen, so he requested the turtleneck be added versus the bare chest of when we last saw him. I think it's a nice little touch, as the first time we ever saw Doc, he was wearing a turtleneck as well. There was also some slight de-aging work done to Alfred to mirror how the actor looked back in 2004. The work was fairly subtle with things like removing wrinkles and lifting up some skin, but come on, look at that beautiful face. It's perfect the way it is. The human sparkler known as Electro had the most changes without a doubt. I mean, seriously, is this the same character? If they didn't repeat the falling into a vat of eel jokes multiple times, I wouldn't blame you for thinking that this guy was from a different universe. But of course, only the Amazing Spider-Man universe can somehow make Electro's origins even lamer than his comic counterpart.
Damn. Gotta be careful where you fall.
We get a very brief look at OG Max Dillon in this one, even complete with the few notes of the absolute banger theme song that was composed by Hans Zimmer. But from there, the character charges up and gets some of that, what's the word, Max?
The new.
They took the original design, which was largely based on the Ultimate comics with that black leather suit and blue prosthetics, and made the daring choice to turn Electro into Hollywood superstar Jamie Foxx. He's literally just Jamie Foxx, guys. I doubt they even gave him a script. Gone is any sign of that freaking nerd we saw in Amazing Spider-Man 2, and now we have a design that's pretty reminiscent of how we saw Electro in the Insomniac game, down to the comic accurate mask being a surcharge of energy. All in all, it's a drastic change, but a welcome one for sure. Ya boy was absolutely stoked to see Willem Dafoe return as the Foe in this movie, and I'm super glad that Willem absolutely chewed up every second of screen time he had in this.
Norman's on sabbatical, honey.
I personally didn't mind the original suit that he wore in Spider-Man 1, but the suit received a lot of criticism online. The biggest one being that the mask was kind of pointless. Willem has that big Jim Carrey elastic face energy, so why not just let him contort every single muscle on his face? They tried making the mask goblin a little more personable in that first movie with the lenses that could retract and that little mesh around the mouth to catch some of his performance. Since No Way Home is fan service the movie, pretty much right off the bat, in a way of pleasing all the fans that have been complaining for 20 years, he smashed his mask and showed off that beautiful Storm and Norman face. Perhaps the biggest and most saddening change of all? It looks like the Nike Air flight posits were removed for more generic looking shoes. RIP Nike sponsorship, you were beautiful. It's official, we have Yassified Aunt May.
What is that?
To demonstrate the young Peters, we received younger and younger actresses in the role to better fit the age gap. After all, it's his aunt, not his grandmother. That's not to say Rosemary Harris isn't comic accurate. In the Stan Lee Steve Ditko run, she was illustrated and written as being so frail that a common cold seemed like a life and death situation for her. Both the comics and the movies have had Aunt May pulling a Benjamin Button and getting younger and younger as we grow older and older. That being said, they each represent the same values and constantly push Peter to become a better man.
I believe there's a hero in all of us that keeps us honest, gives us strength, makes us noble.
Of course, in No Way Home, Marissa Tomei was given the role of pretty much being Uncle Ben, giving the great power speech before dying as a result of Peter and her own ideals for whatever reason.
Let's save the supervillains, yeah.
So, who's next?
It's me, Flint Marco.
Thanks for the exposition, Flint. In 2007, Sony desperately wanted Thomas Hayden Church in more scenes to avoid having to run all those sand simulations and all the madness that is 3D rendering. I think it's hilarious that all these years later, those very same processes that they once hated ended up being a lifeline in bringing back the Sandman. It's still not exactly clear as to why the actor didn't return to the physical role of Flint Marco. It wouldn't appear that there were any scheduling conflicts, and it was probably due to COVID restrictions, but unlike some others listed, this was a time where the computer generated imagery really shined. In 2007, Sony ImageWorks' biggest challenge yet was creating the Sandman. At the time, there were no programs or code created that was able to achieve what they wanted to bring to the walking beach on screen. It took the team 2 whole years to develop the tech, and then for years it lay dormant. Early in the film's production process, they dusted off that tech and wanted to flex it with all the improvements of modern-day simulations. Sandman's original design was going to be amorphous with constantly shifting sands, kind of like when we first see him at the start of the movie, but as they developed the character, they decided to have a CG model body with the sand simulation going around it. While Venom was barely in this movie, really only being included to introduce the symbiote to the MCU and being all like,
Whoa, Avengers, that sounds like a cinematic universe that's way more interesting than mine.
I think that the Venom Let There Be Carnage post-credit scene introduced something pretty interesting with that hive mind.
80 billion light years of hive knowledge across universes.
While it could have just been included as a quick way to justify why Eddie was sent to the MCU, it could lead to some pretty interesting developments in Venom 3, as now we know that the Venom with Topher Grace is in the same mind or knowledge versus the Venom with Tom Hardy, which I assume would also be in the same knowledge pool of the 616, so then we can have Agent Venom or Mac Gargan's Scorpion. It's kind of interesting to see that as everything's changing, there's this constant of a hive mind that's just been thrown into the fray, and I'd have to imagine that it gets used at some point in the future. The big difference between Andrew's love interest and Tom's? One's still alive. Throughout the years, the various Peter's love interests have slowly started to receive more to do with the actual plot and started fighting back rather than largely just being a damsel in distress trope like Kirsten Dunst's Mary Jane Watson. Although admittedly, there's still a long way to go for this. Gwen Stacy stepping up directly led to her death, and we've only seen Michelle Jones fight off Mysterio drones. Zendaya's Euphoria co-star Sydney Sweeney was just cast in the Madam Web film, and I'd love to see her become the Black Cat, which would mean Spidey would finally have a love interest that can actually do something in a battle. Then we got our old pal the Lizard, an entirely boring design and an afterthought addition to the Amazing Spider-Man. Almost a decade after that movie, he's returning and nope, nothing changed. Sorry to all 6 of you Lizard fans out there, although there was this cool Lizard concept art though. There was an idea of something interesting, but that didn't change.